I mean, that's pretty radical.
Well, as you pointed out before, there are really two different ways to apply the Sharia. One is through violence. Taliban, Khomeini would be examples. And the other way is working through the institutions politically and non-violently. And by and large, in the West, if you are in that latter group and you're not engaged in criminal activity or violent activity, you get a pass. Governments and other public institutions, including many television stations, many universities, will say, you're fine, you're okay. It's just talk. It's okay.
Chris,
so in some ways, that's more dangerous because it gets a pass. Yeah. Nobody gives bin Laden a pass.
Nobody gives the Tea Party a pass, and they haven't said anything. Tell me, Chris, what you're most concerned about here with, because we looked. There's several groups, and I don't want to single one out, but there's one that we found that is a hedge fund, and it's a Sharia hedge fund, and could find some nefarious characters in and around, et cetera, but you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But I didn't see anything that necessarily was smoking gun bad. When it comes to finance, are we missing something that we should be seeing?
There's very few smoking guns, just as you said. Look, Taqi Usmani's one, Qaradawi's one, but there's other Sharia scholars that have been much more careful of what they've said and what they've written over the years. It's very difficult to figure them out. You can look back at some of the backgrounds of some of these people, and you look at where they're educated, and you realize that they're educated in incubators for jihad.
Hang on just a second. Tiffany, do you feel comfortable with me saying the name of this hedge fund? Okay, could you remind me of the name of this hedge fund?
Sharia.
Okay, Sharia Capital. Sharia Capital is one of my researchers actually came over to my house on a Saturday and said, Glenn, I just found this, and this doesn't seem right. And they started looking into it, and there's a lot of things in and around. Can you tell me anything? Because there's no smoking guns, but you agree that there's things in there that just are a little...
Look, the whole problem here is that if you go back to Great Britain and see what's happened in Great Britain, the purpose of Sharia finance is to promote Sharia, and one of the ways that they've basically lulled the British to sleep into accepting Sharia into their society is through Sharia finance. The Archbishop of Canterbury made a statement a couple of years ago in which he said that British common law is going to have to incorporate aspects of Sharia, and it really isn't that big a deal, seeing as we've already incorporated Sharia-compliant finance. This is a Trojan horse that's operating. Now, in terms of that specific hedge fund, look, there is a Sharia advisor on that hedge fund who was educated in a madrasa in Pakistan that is a madrasa that has all kinds of ties to jihadis. Now, that doesn't mean that he's a jihadi, but he went to the same school as a bunch of them. So it's very worrisome.
All right. Is there, can these, like for instance, a hedge fund like that, the hedge funds are unregulated. They have, I mean, wild power with wild amounts of money. There was a Pentagon report that came out recently that said that there are sovereign funds or huge pools of wealth that they have seen. For instance, they almost collapsed on the last one. There's an unexplained amount of wealth being sucked out of the system quickly when we had our financial collapse. And somebody did a report for the Pentagon and said, that was unusual, there's something wrong there, and they think that was a test run. Somebody was trying to collapse our system, and they haven't found them, and they're still trying to do it. Is this something that a hedge fund the size of the one that you know could do? Is there something that we as Americans should be looking for? Are there any telltale signs, or is this just something that is just saying, well, they might be giving money to terrorists here. Like, that's not bad enough, but they might be funneling money off to terrorists.
This is what I would say on that. I don't think there's any evidence that that particular hedge fund is involved.
Yeah, I'm talking generally. I'm not talking about that particular.
Certainly the financial jihadists around the world who promote Sharia-compliant finance, many of them have the motivation to do this. We know Qaradawi hates America. We know Usmani hates America. They've said it. They've written it. They control a lot of money in the Sharia-compliant finance world. Then you have Iran. the largest Sharia-compliant financial institutions in the world are not these names that we see up here. They're state-controlled Iranian banks, by far. Iran has over twice as many Sharia-compliant assets under management as Saudi Arabia. So these are people and institutions that certainly are motivated to damage America in the right circumstances.
Okay. Now, when we come back, I want to spend a little bit of time with Daniel here on some of the things that are happening here in the United States. I just read, Daniel, I think it was like last week or 2 weeks ago, there was yet another judge that said, you know what, Sharia law applies here. That is suicide, America. Wake up to it next. All right. This week I have been talking to you about the threat over in the Middle East, and I tell you, I believe, well, let me ask you, how many people have been watching the show this week and feel that you feel comfortable at least that maybe America is headed down a path where we're on the wrong side in the Middle East? Yeah, that's pretty significant. How many people think that, not necessarily by us, but that Israel is being set up? I mean, look at that. We are coddling our enemies at the very best now. We're helping them in all over the world. And one of the ways that it happens under the radar is with Sharia law. It is a threat to America. Daniel Pipes is with us. He is the director and founder of the Middle East Forum. He's a visiting fellow at the Hoover Institute and author of Militant Islam Reaches America. And with us also is Chris Holton. He's a vice president at the Center for Security Policy. Daniel, it's amazing to me, and we'll get into the 12th Imam here in a minute, but it's amazing to me how, I think 5 years ago, before this economic meltdown started, I was very tuned in to what was happening in Iran and the Middle East. And then we kind of took our eye off the ball because America started having so many problems under George W. Bush, and then just kept cascading. And haven't been paying attention enough. And I sit here now and think, oh my gosh, what have people been doing while America went back to sleep? And one of the things is Sharia law is like starting to ugly creep in America, right?
People are so focused on terrorism that they don't pay attention to the insidious educational, media, legal, and political growth of radical Islam in the West as a whole, and the United States in particular. Yes.
Do you, organizations, I mean, they're streaming now the Muslim Brotherhood. Our administration says nothing wrong with the Muslim Brotherhood. You agree with that?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with? Nothing wrong with it?
I agree with it? No. I agree with the administration saying yes.
Oh, yeah, no. I know that. All of a sudden I'm like, Daniel, what's happening? They've gotten to you, man!
No, I don't agree with that.
Yeah, okay. What about organizations here in America that have been mainstreamed already, even by the last administration? CARE.
Great example. CARE was founded in 1994 as a stepchild of Hamas and has undertaken to promote the ideas of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the parent of Hamas in turn, in the United States. And it does it very aggressively, but it does it non-violently.
Right. But, I'm always a little worried about any organization that fights so hard to silence people it disagrees with.
And it has ties to terrorism. It just itself is not engaged in terrorism. But there are plenty of employees and board members and the like who've got ties to terrorism and apologizes for terrorism. It's a dirty organization, and it's an aggressive organization, and it has been by and large accepted not so much by the government, which has queasy feelings about it, but by the press and the academy, which are celebrating it. I mean, CARE's ability to get a story is remarkable. It holds a press conference, and you've got a story.
You say that the biggest concern of the creep of Sharia is actually polygamy.
I think it's the deepest matter. There are lots of different fronts, but to me the deepest of all is the institution of marriage, which, yeah, I'm not saying it's always maintained, but monogamy is the rule of the land. And look at the Mormons and what trouble they had with polygamy.
Right, and they still have, in Utah, they still have people.
Well,
full disclosure, I am one, but I got one wife because that's plenty. But there are still people that have been excommunicated and everything else, and there's communities.
Hit hard by the law.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the United States, there's no polygamy acceptable yet. But I think it's coming because you can look at other jurisdictions, like the United Kingdom or Ontario, where it is
polygamy
legal,
is legal in England?
So long as it's contracted in a country where it is legal. So you have a man and 2 wives and 5 children coming from Morocco or from India, where it's legal. They arrive in Britain or in Ontario, and they say, we're here. And the government says, fine. And the government in Britain goes further and has different allocations for social welfare for the first wife, the second wife, the third wife. And if the man dies intestate, then there are special provisions for the different wives. It's all very legal.
Just pick up Chris's face here, just will you? Chris is just like, we're so dead. We're just so dead.
Now that's profound, I think. That's important. And I think it's coming our way. One can see it already. Look, here in New York City a few years ago, there was a major fire. Some 11 people were killed, including children. Well, it turned out the 2 families involved were both polygamous African immigrant families. And it was covered like there was nothing out of the ordinary. The mayor went to visit them, and it was all very normal. Of course, some people are monogamous, some are polygamous. There was no particular difference.
Yeah, well, where you would say, you bring in these people who claim to be Mormons, and they're polygamist, and the house burns down.
Right.
Oh my gosh, that's a story for a month. We're almost suicidal.
The press is full of puff pieces about men who say, well, I was raised in a polygamous household. It was wonderful. I had all these aunties around, and I want to have it too, and my children love it, and the wives love each other.
Hang on just a second. Is there a guy in here who says, man, if I could just have 2 wives, it'd be sweet? Anybody here have any takers? I don't. Not that we don't cherish and love the one wife. I just can't imagine, talking to one and then having from the other one. It's nuts. All right, back in just a second. I want to show you a disturbing tape that has come out of the Middle East this week, and then we talk to the audience. Just a second.